Hey, what is going on, guys? Hopefully, you're having a day so far. So it's another episode of Millennial with Billy and Mel. So what's going on, guys?
We look really big on the screen.
I know. I did something a little bit different. Let me see if I can quickly
That's okay,
make that a little bit different. There we go.
Good.
There we are. Now we're not as big.
A little close up.
Ooh. Yeah, listen, sometimes you got to get up close and personal. This is an up close and personal type of topic today, so I think it's definitely beneficial. But like I said, guys, today is another episode of Millennial with Billy and Mel, and what we're going to be talking about today is mental health, and I think it's such an important topic to talk about. I'm not going to say it's an interesting topic because I always say that, so it's an important topic to talk about today. But if you are, which I see a couple of you are joining the live, please comment who you are, where you're coming in from. We'd love to give you a shout out, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on mental health and why it's important to talk about maybe some of the things that you do on a daily basis to help your mental health. But before we get into all that, right? Mel, what's going on? How are you doing?
Oh my. It has been so great. Speaking of mental health, and seasonal depression and or weather, how weather affects us. I have had a shitty week because of this shitty weather. And I wake up so unmotivated in the mornings. It's so gray outside. I was just super tired. And I just feel like the day dragged into the next day, I was not as productive as I wanted to be, but I tell you, there is something about when it is sunny out. I am, I'm up, I'm ready to go, I'm pumped, and this weather has not been very conducive for that. But yeah, I got some good stuff done. I wanted to show, I've been talking about that apparel business, and we got some samples printed for my launch here. And, get ready for buying some shirts. We're going to start slow. We made a plan. I have a new intern, like I talked about. I met with his parents just because I thought it would be respectful and, get them to know me and get to know them. And we're going to be working together. So there were some good moments of the week, but hoping for a better weekend. What about you?
Yeah, I've had the same feeling. Like Monday didn't start. I think really the week started off bad just because it was Monday. It started raining, right? Yep. And it was just crazy. Our basement kind of didn't flood, but some water came in, and so that's always fun, right? Especially it was crazy. It happened like 30 minutes right before I was supposed to meet a client. So I was like, "Hey, can we reschedule?" I watered my basement, but I just felt off this entire week. Like I just felt like I was a step behind. Like I was always like catching things rather than being in front of things.
Me too. And I felt I was in slow motion. And I mean, there were like 2 mornings I just didn't want to get out of bed. I mean, and I get that way when I'm stressed. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this week as far as mental health. I mean, I don't necessarily have anxiety or depression that I've been diagnosed with. I think we can get into all that, but I definitely think that there's stress related feelings about about those topics that sometimes we're just not really feeling like doing much.
Yeah. Today was ending the week with Friday, right? It was definitely, today was that day. I just felt like I'm studying for an exam that I'm going to be taking at the end of the month, and it was just like I knew all the material, but I just felt like I was just in the middle of the test, and I was just like, I just can't do this today. Yeah. Like I just had to walk away. And so I literally drove and had to go pick something up. That's why we're a little late, is that I was picking something up for actually something that I kind of wanted to announce here live on the show. I already kind of put it out there on Facebook. On my personal page, if you haven't seen, but if you were watching, if you're an avid watcher of the show, we did talk about 2 weeks ago about bucket list items, right? Mm-hmm. And Mel's been doing an amazing job playing some golf.
I have been, yes. I'm about to get my tattoo scheduled. Oh shit!
So I mean, we're doing things, people. We're doing things for the for the gram, right? No, I'm kidding. But one of the things that was on my bucket list that I mentioned is I want to do a triathlon, right? And I've always wanted to do one. And so, but man, triathlons, if anybody that's out there that's ever ran one, the legit triathlons, the Olympic ones are like ridiculously long.
Yeah.
But this is what's called a sprint triathlon. So the distances are way significantly shorter. And so a couple of the guys in the office decided that they were going to do this. And so I jumped aboard. Cool. And so September 18th, I'm going to be actually doing my very first sprint triathlon. So I was at the sporting goods store buying goggles because there's a swim. It's a swim, a bike ride, and a run all in the same day. So I was buying goggles for swimming. So which is, I didn't realize how many freaking goggles there are. I was there for like 35 minutes trying to figure out what I was buying. So, but I got what I needed, but that's why we're a little late today. So, yes. But yeah, big bucket list item will be taken off the list. Yeah.
We'll have to follow your. We'll have to stay up to date. What's the date for this?
September 18th. So
okay, everybody.
About less than a month away. So
put it on the calendar.
I'm
clicking away, guys. I'm clicking away.
So, but anyways, like we said, what we really want to talk about today is mental health, right? And I know on other episodes that we've kind of touched base on it. Like I know we talked about depression, right? But overall mental health, it encompasses so many different things. It's not only your personal mental health, but like, how do you deal with somebody that's maybe a family member or a friend or a coworker that has, some mental health issues, right? Those are just as real as the ones that we deal with on an everyday basis. And so what really sparked my mindset behind this talk, because I kind of went to Mel and said, this is what I want to talk about this week, is, I'm through some personal things in dealing with a situation where somebody's having some mental health issues, right? And I'm having to deal with their mental health issues, in a good way, but still the toll it takes on them and the toll it takes on the other person, I think it's a two-way street. It's definitely a conversation we need to have.
Absolutely. And I think I've had this about people that are, in their 40s that have high school, children that, and the mental health going on right now with children with schools and masks and their mental health because of going virtual and all those. And then obviously, just other instances in life with relationships and divorce and, finances and all those things that cause us to have, whether it's anxiety, depression, or just stress. There's situationally stress that can seem just like depression, right? And there's a lot of different ways to cope with that and facing it. But I've had these conversations over and over and over because we're all going through something, if not 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And then our family and our significant others or our parents or whatever, that it affects everybody. If you don't take care of yourself, we've said this before, you can't take care of anybody else. And taking care of yourself so that you can see, and you're not, I don't use the pun, your goggles, but if you have the clarity to be able to see those things, you can definitely address a lot of these things, but people aren't addressing them, in my opinion, with themselves, let alone the people that are so close to them that they need to.
Yeah. Like you were just saying, and we've talked about before, is I think the generation before us, like our parents and stuff like that, it just wasn't something we talked about. It just, it was like, hey, just make it happen, right? Don't talk about your feelings. Don't talk about how you're feeling. Don't talk about your emotions. You need to just stay quiet and just do what you got to do. And it's crazy. And I feel like a lot of the generation before us are like, now they're getting older, right? They're getting closer to retirement, or they're getting, to a phase of their life where they're not going to be maybe working as much, or their kids are way grown up and stuff like that. And they're all kind of having identity crisis, right? And kind of breaking down in a sense, right? Kind of reverting back to, I might be speaking out my butt here, but this is just how I feel. I feel they're reverting back to maybe being childlike almost in a sense.
It is. Well, I agree. And I think that it's hard because, we're at a phase too that some of the people our age have children, but then they have parents who are in that situation who are, like you said, it's not necessarily reverting, I would say like children, but the idea of the reality phase and like facing those things. I think that there's even people our age who are not facing that. How do you expect to get through that, move on and unpack, like you call it unpack, your what's going on. If we don't unpack it, it's going to be there in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And there's stuff that we haven't unpacked as adults now from our childhood. And then it's just going to be added on top of that with things that happen right now. And I think that that's what I've gone through with my parents and my mom. We've had a lot of conversations about this because there's in our 30s, they're in their 50s, 60s. There's a lifelong event. There's lifelong, and I don't use the word trauma, but I mean, there's things that need to be grieved, unpacked, discussed, faced, admitted, all those things that I'm interested in doing right now in my life, but I can't imagine that people have, 30 more years of that, twice as much as we do. So it's like starting now, addressing our own mental health issues and things that traumas and things that we're going through right now, let alone in our past. Hey, Jessica, thanks for watching. But I think that I'm super interested, and this is such a huge topic for me that I enjoy because we are both self-help and improvement junkies that, we want to do that. And for me, it's creating more of a divide for the people that aren't. And I'm noticing more too about the people in my life, and maybe you can relate to this, that if you're going through something that is a trauma that you need to grieve, which is a lot of things, if you're not getting the help from counseling and or reading podcasts, self-reflection, something's wrong, in my opinion. And you're never going to be able to get to a place where you can escape that, whether, carry that weight, you're going to carry that weight. And that's where I struggle right now, is with the coping mechanisms of some people or lack thereof.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, I think I look back at my, upbringing and stuff like that. And I love both of my parents. Let me just, let that disclaimer out there, that I love both of you if you happen to be watching. But like, my childhood wasn't the easiest of childhoods. It wasn't the, everything is bright and rainbows and stuff like that. I have definitely dealt with, and everybody has. I'm not saying like I've dealt with more than other people, but and I had learned at an early age to kind of like push everything down and kind of like put everything in boxes, right? And kind of, all right, I'm going to put this away over here. I'm going to stack this over here. And I never really dealt with issues. And I remember, because I talked about on Monday on an episode of What's Brewing with Billy, I talked about like response versus reaction. And for me, like especially like when I was in college, before I really got into self-development and stuff like that, and really working on the 6 inches between my head, like I was an angry person. Like I would fly off the handle at anything. You can ask anybody that lived with me, like I was still Billy. I was still very bubbly, but like little things would set me off, and I would just fly off the handle after nothing. And it wasn't until I started to realize that I needed to unpack some of this stuff and let it out that, that was my biggest fear, is like I was going to get older and not know how to deal with that stuff. And and maybe start drinking,
drugs,
using,
I mean, whatever.
Yeah. To, call it like we see it, and using something else to cope with that, that hurt, that pain. And so that would, and I see it now. I see a lot of maybe kids that or people that were sheltered a lot of their life. Like now they're, life is changing and stuff like that. And now they're having to deal with that. And they really don't know, like you said, don't have that coping mechanism, don't know where my outlet is for this.
Yeah. And I think that because it was things that were almost, I don't want to say shunned, or, I think that maybe it wasn't the most promoted thing to talk about feelings or counseling, or I think there's a huge stigma about counseling. We've talked about this on other podcasts, that people are afraid and it's bad, or, oh, if you're in a relationship and you have to go to counseling, oh, no. I mean, in my Let's Hip group that I was in, we had somebody that had joined as a marriage counselor, and they said, hey, you guys go to take your car for once a year to get your checkup with your car for inspection. You guys go to, you go to get your physical every year for your body, to get your body, make sure that everything's in tune with your body and your physical health. Why are you not going for counseling, marriage counseling once a year, check in, say, hey, here's what's going on. Here's this. And I agree. Absolutely. And in Europe, there's counseling even before you get engaged or before you get married, and there's things that you can discuss on communication skills and the love languages and all these things that none of us knew about before we got into relationships or before we got married, or, before you have children, and even discussing finances, like you said. And those are all the things that cause a lot of these issues, but mainly about communication. But I think that counseling, the normalizing going to counseling, I have promoted it for a very long time. My mom will say, oh yeah, counseling's great, everybody should go to counseling, but she wasn't, like, you can talk the talk, but let's be honest, if you're not going, like, don't sit there and say that it's great for everybody. Again, love my parents to death, but we know this all, that there's other ways of learning, like reading, like you said. But I think talking to a professional and hearing an unbiased outside opinion on things that you're doing and being able to be vulnerable, hearing about yourself. That's why a lot of people don't want to go to counseling, is because they don't want to hear anything about themselves that they don't want to hear. They don't want to face the truth, in my opinion, and they run away from being better and growing and doing better because they're not ready to face that. But when's the right time? I
mean, there's no time like the present. Like, I have never gone to a therapist before. Like, I mean, I've talked to people about my problems, but never hey, I'm sitting on a couch talking to somebody with a notepad, right? Talking about my feelings type of deal. But I've always wanted.
My counselor does not have a notepad. Okay.
So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, the stereotypical, you see the people on TV shows, they're laying down on a couch, they're thinking about their feelings and stuff like that.
Holding themselves.
Yeah, holding themselves. They're always like this. Have you realized that?
That is so wrong.
People are just like this. Like, I don't know why the Hollywood depicts people that
they probably make, because they want all of us to be cuckoo crazy and not go to counseling.
But and Mel knows a lot about what I'm kind of talking about, and I don't want to talk about too much personal stuff, right? I'll go into those details. But when the situation happened in my life that has led to a lot of just stress this month, just unbelievable amounts of stress. I literally turned to my sister a couple of weeks ago and was just I just need to go talk to somebody. I'm down for it. The question is, it's who do you talk to? Right. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's coaches out there, there's life coaches, there's therapists, there's, psychiatric people. So it's what degree do I need? What level do I need to start off at? Who's the type of people? I think that's a lot of people's problem, is that they get because you search anything on the internet and you get a million answers, and then you get frustrated. And you're I'm just not going to do it. Right. That's how I am. Right. Mm-hmm. That's how I was looking for my goggles today. I was researching a bunch of stuff and I was I have no idea what I need to buy. I'm just going to buy something. Right. And so I think that's a big issue for people. And I'd love to see what people's reaction is to that. If A, have you ever talked to a therapist? And B, if you haven't, what's the reason why? Right? What And so mine's a stupid reason. Like, I just don't know where to go. I'm sure I could, find some people in the central PA group that could probably direct me to somebody. But I think that's a real thing too.
I think there's fear. Like I said, I think a lot of people just don't want to face the reality of that they're going through. And I do think that you get to the point where you just want it so bad. You want it bad enough that you just take the leap, right? Because I think it is a lot of fear. I think it is, sure, who do you go? How do you find somebody? But I even had gone to somebody that was just more of a therapist, and they were just listening and not really saying anything. So then I said, well, okay, it's not really doing anything for me. My own best friends are doing more for me when I talk to them than I'm paying somebody for, right? So I ended up going to a step further of a, psychologist, trained doctor, professional. Now the psychiatrist is one that's prescribing medication, which I don't need, or at least I don't think so. But so obviously there are different types of counselors and therapists and all that. And I think that it might be that you try a couple before you find somebody. And I do think that it's not a temporary thing. I think it also could be something that you stick with for forever. I mean, whether you're going every week. I mean, I had a traumatic event happen and I went 2 weeks in a row. I really just only go every maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But there were topics in my life that I needed to address and I need to discuss. But then there's also things that we talk about from childhood and from our parents. And you and I talked about this, and like attachment styles, how we are with people, in different attachment styles. And I'm learning about it myself, and then I can see it about other people. And I'm actually like red flag right away, because it's stuff that I'm learning about myself, but then I can also apply that to other people. And you and I were talking about something I sent to you one day, which was transactional analysis. And It's funny that you brought this up about earlier. I don't want to go too far into it, but when you said something about sometimes our parents sort of revert to a childlike stage. Obviously, we're adults, and some of us are parent. I'm not a parent, you're not a parent, but there is something. If you Google, I popped it up. I'll just show this real quick. That there's different states, and it's like the ego state, and there's parent, adult, and child, and we all have to go from child, adult to parent. But sometimes in our actual parents sometimes aren't in that adult state with us, and they go from parent to child, and we have to sometimes be the parent sometimes. And it's in relationships too. So that's really interesting. If anybody's struggling with, their significant other or a friend or a parent, maybe that's something that is happening, is because they're not connecting on that adult level, and either being, child, having fun, parent. There's definitely a lot of stuff that I'm learning that's really interesting behind that, because that's where I think some of the disconnect comes from, that I've had too, because I'm seeing certain friends go through things where you almost have to be a parent. Jess said, you guys are amazing. These topics more people need to talk about. Thanks for being vulnerable and brave and sharing these messages. Absolutely, because that's where I think I've made a lot of my connections lately with really great people in my life, is talking about these things and being vulnerable. But it's just because I think it's going to make us grow more and find out who we are. Like you said about not knowing who they are, our parents, like who wants to wait another 30 years to figure that out? Like we want to do that now, and we want to be with people and our significant others and our friends that know who they are too. And we do.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, because obviously me and Megan definitely want to have kids, right? In some form or fashion, whether it be our kids or we have, we adopt, whatever it may be. But I am kind of thankful the way that things worked out, that we don't have children right yet, just because like it has given me and Megan the ability to like really grow, like, and really, I don't think you ever fully understand yourself, because like you said, I think with a good therapist, just like a good coach, just like a good life coach or something like that, there's there's parts of your brain that you don't know exist, right? That you don't know how to expose. And once those areas are exposed, then that's when the work can be done. Mm-hmm. And like you said, sometimes we don't want to expose those areas, right? And so, but, a lot of that work that I've done on myself and Megan's done on herself I think is going to lead us to be better parents. Just because we have, and I think like so many parents, right? And I get it, like your kids are your life and stuff like that. And I don't know what that feeling is like yet, but like, I feel like a lot of parents, like their identity is their kids, right? And once that goes away, like the kids leave or something like that, like I don't know any stats. I'm sure, I can look them up, but, I feel like a lot of older adults are having that moment of crisis where they're like, I don't have any identity outside of this. I never expressed how I was feeling to my significant other. That's why I think you see also a lot of divorce after kids get out of the house, right? Because they're like, who is this person? I don't know how to interact with this person because we've only, we got married, we had kids, and then we worked, and then we provided, and then all that's now over. Like, who is this person? Like, I don't even really know who I married. And so I'm just like, that's something I think is a relevant topic. I think that's, pertinent to this conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely appreciate you guys, spending the time together and being a team together and knowing how you are together, how you be with children and all that. And I think that, look, I've only speak about these things because I went through I went through a lot of this with my divorce, with a toxic relationship. After my counseling from that was needed and more than my own divorce. So I've been through situations where, I was in a really, really bad place and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I can speak about it. I'm not perfect and I don't, none of us have all the answers. The Millennial podcast does not promote definitive, what are we saying, expert advice? Yes. But I only say this because I know where I was and where I've gotten and where I want to be. But I was just with my best friend, Lauren, and I've always said that I really value how her and her husband parent from the first kid. They have 3 now. And I've always said that. And when I think that someone's doing a really great job at something or, I want to let them know that I really appreciate them. And I've told her that years ago. And she just brought up the fact that, they put themselves first. They put the spouse second and then the kids. And it's something that she did bring up about pre-Cana, which they're Catholic, and you have to do the counseling with the priest beforehand, and that there's things that you learn, and that's what is said in, religion wise, you put, that's the order of things. And I think that there's something to really be said about that, taking care of yourself, making sure that you're good, that you're, getting the self-care that you need, and then checking, making sure that the other person is. And if you're both doing that, you should be able to then take care of each other and provide each other's needs and wants. And obviously be a team to then parent your children, right? I mean, because that example in my opinion, shouldn't be the 20, 30, 40-year-old marriage, like you said, where they're finding, who am I? Oh, who is this person? Or, that is really important, in my opinion, is to make sure that you know who you are first. And not completely, like you said, I think we're always changing, but to be able to be on your own and be that person individually, and then with somebody together, and then as a family,
Yeah. So I'm reading a stat from the National Institute of Mental Health Wellness or something like that. And they said that young adults 18 to 20 have the highest, prevalence of mental health issues, followed by our age group, which is about 26 to 49, and then 50-year-old is 2.9% of that. I feel like that number is going to be growing, but it's interesting to, kind of talk about, because we do talk about, other generations, not just millennials here. And the younger generations, that's another interesting topic, is like, because of, social media, the internet is a great tool to be used by all to learn, to promote business, to connect with people. Like, it's a great tool that way, but it's a really double-edged sword the opposite direction, because I feel like sometimes we don't know how to, maybe the younger generations aren't going to know how to, and I know this probably sounds cliche, might not know how to deal with people face to face. Like it's different dealing with somebody through an email, social media post, rather than actual face to face conversation. And then not only, like you said, the pandemic, right, probably affected them, or definitely affected them. School, like you said, and then politics, right? You throw politics in the mess, right? And you have that completely charged kind of dynamic, and it's gonna cause a lot of issues down the road.
Yeah, and I think even online date. I mean, like all these apps now with online dating. I mean, even people that are, having these conversations with people in the messages and text. I don't do online dating, but so I don't really know. But I think that is another example of, for our age, that as far as real life in-person connection is lacking or missing. But it is nice to get to know somebody, I think, ahead of time.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that there are, we had did a podcast about stress, and we said that we're all, there's always going to be stress. There's never a time that we won't be under stress. But I think that it's figuring out what helps you to de-stress, or, maybe there are things that medication will help. And if you have to be on something for the rest of your life, or find something that makes you not have those feelings. I mean, we see stuff on social media all day long about anxiety and depression. My ex-husband had anxiety that he had since high school, and he was on medication every day to control your brain. I mean, that's what it does. And he tried to get off. He was on it for 13 years, and it was too fast, too soon. But it's like, if you have to be on something because of, you have diabetes, you have to not eat and drink things. People that have alcoholism, they can't drink alcohol, and if you have different things with anxiety and depression, and you have to be on medication for it, like, oh, okay. I think that there is like the stigma of having these things. I mean, I'm sure I talk with my friends, there's high functioning anxiety, and ADD and all these things that guaranteed I have, I'm just not diagnosed with it. I just figure out how to, I mean, everyone that knows me says about my energy and about this, and I'm go, 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 and all these things that I've figured out a way to deal with them. I'm sure that there's something, if I go to a psychiatrist and they do all these tests, there's going to be something there. But if it got to the point that it interrupted my day-to-day functioning, or my job, or my relationship, I would absolutely want to figure out a way to not let it affect me. I don't know if that makes any sense. I mean, I know that, these are things that you can't control. It's nothing that, we all know that it's nothing that you can control. Oh, what's wrong? And, just relax, or do this, do that. You can't, your brain you can't do that, obviously, in these situations. But I do think that there's plenty of ways that people who aren't feeling the way that they want to feel, then there's so many ways out there to get to that point,
Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, like, I would never, like, I'm the same way as you. Like, if it's going to benefit me, like, I'm going to explore that opportunity to get better. And, especially when it comes to the medication, right? There's so many different rules of thought out there. There's some people that think, if you just eat well and you just do this and you do this, you don't need to take medication. But I think you should explore every avenue that you could possibly have. I mean, don't, and just because you take, most people are like, oh, you have to take medication for that, or you're taking like, crazy pills or something like that. It's like, no, it's like, I'm taking this so that like I can be the best version of myself, because not only do I deserve that as a human being, but the people that I love, care, and surround myself with deserve the best version of me at the same time. So if you're somebody that's watching this and you're saying to yourself, well, you're embarrassed about medication you're taking, or that you see a therapist, like, tell those people that maybe be embarrassed, I guess, to go like hit the
Kick
bricks.
rocks.
Yeah. Like do you take care of you, and that's all you have to worry about at the end of the day. But I that's just kind of how I feel about that. I feel, if the science is there and the medication works for you, right? But we also got to be careful about being overprescribed things, right? And taking way too much stuff, and actually getting with a doctor that specializes in mental health, and not just a general doctor that says, oh, well, he said he had anxiety, so I gave him XYZ pill, right?
Right.
Because you can get into bad situations with that. You can take the wrong medication, you can take the wrong dosage, and it can really, really affect what's going on chemically. So that's my only recommendation, is that, because I know from firsthand experience dealing with what I'm dealing with, that you need to talk to somebody that's an actual professional that knows what they're talking about, not just some general doctor. Like, if you're going to talk to a general doctor, get them to refer you to somebody else that does this on a day-to-day basis. So I guess I'm going to get off my soapbox now. But
no, I mean, I agree, because I was super stressed out in my mid-20s. I was doing the station show in New York in the Javits Center. I was procrastinating. I had to get all this stuff done. Super stressed. I was driving myself crazy. I couldn't concentrate. And I just went to the doctor, and she said, you're just really stressed. You need to take some time. I wasn't sleeping, and I got like lorazepam or something to relax, just like temporary. And it did. It went away once I could, like, the coping and or not having all those things on top of me at one time. And I think that there's a huge difference between the mental health of anxiety and depression, where it is something that, is not, I don't want to say not controllable. I don't know what the word is. Like, there's definitely things that are that a diagnosis that that's going on with certain people. And then I think that there's other things that are caused because of stress. Situationally depressed is not depression, right? I was situationally depressed at one point. And there's ways to fix that and not be, it's not a permanent thing. It's just situationally. And I think that I have a lot of friends, and we're, I can't sleep, or, there, and things about can't concentrate, and my mind's here and I'm doing this. I think a lot of the time, and you can get on medication for certain things, but deep down, I think that it's caused by something in our lives that we're not addressing, or we're not happy with, or we're not fixing the real problem. And again, the medication will be fine. Oh, I need Xanax because I'm freaking out and I can't sleep and I'm this. And, again, you're prescribed for something, but what's the real problem deep down? What's causing these feelings of depression and or, again, I feel like there's situationally, and there's aspects and things that I sit here and say, well, you can feel depressed. You might not actually have the diagnosis of being, of depression. That is definitely something that is, like I'm saying, I know the difference between that, but there's people who are on medication, go to their doctor, I'm this, and this, but it's really unpacking, in my opinion, a lot of those deeper seated things that people don't want to talk about, that relieves that weight sometimes. And I've done it. And I think that there's a lot of people that we know and going through the world, and they would be so better off if they would sit down and let all those things out, because we know people that are on, whether it's on drugs or doing drugs. I mean, there's things out there. And alcohol. I mean, drugs and alcohol. You know, you got Adderall, you got Coke, you got all these things that people are doing sometimes to numb themselves. And it's obvious sometimes that they're numbing themselves from the really what's going on and facing those things and then making changes to then not need those drugs. Like that's what you said at the beginning, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. Like, I think that's I think that's a major problem in this fight is I think we've gotten to a point where like I've talked to Megan about this. I've talked to other medical professionals about this, that we just like somebody tells us we have a problem. Well, we have a pill for that. Right. Or we have something like that. Right. It's going to mask the symptoms. It's going to take your depression away. It's going to help you sleep.
Well, they're run by pharmaceutical companies, doctors, insurance, and pharmaceutical companies. So but I'm not surprised.
Not surprised, right? But I totally agree with you. It's when are we going to take the time? And not everything's going to be corrected overnight and I think that's a lot of the reason that people maybe don't go to therapy is that it's a long-term play, people. It's not you go to one show or you go to one therapist, you talk to him for 10 minutes and you're good to go. Like, that's not how that works. Like, it's a constant thing. Like, you can see all the books behind me. Like, I read a book, at least 2 books a month on self-development. I would say out of all the books I read, 80% are self-development, 20% are like between fun, like entertainment, and like maybe learning some stuff and stuff like that. But a lot of it is we know what we need to do. It's just we don't do it, right? It's very simple.
Practicing, yeah.
But we don't take that time. And I think we live in such a society, which we had a podcast about this, talking about the microwave society. We want it now, right? We want it instantaneous. We want it delivered to our doorstep in the next hour or we're pissed off, right? No, you're going to have to go to a therapist. Like, how many times a week or a month you said you
I go every 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, and here's the thing.
Tune-up, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, I was going, let's just say, you know, there were instances where I would go, you know, every 2 weeks or something at the beginning, you know, maybe, and just kind of address a lot of the current issues of my breakup or, you know, a death of a friend and those things. And you know, some ways to work on relationships with our parents and working on it, obviously, once you address it. And now I go probably 3 or 4 weeks. And it's also because his schedule's, you know, I would go more. I would go every other week, but his schedule's booked. And here's something very interesting. He doesn't take my insurance. So I pay out of pocket $150 every time I go. So that's once a month, I'm paying $150. But, you know, it's worth it for me. It's an investment in myself. And I would rather pay that than dinners or drinks or shots at the bar. And there's a huge difference between even the people that I hang out with, unfortunately, were in what the priorities are in bettering themselves and the money that you're spending. To me, I wear my hat that my friend Holbrook let me make. He had it, but it says excuses are for losers. Like, I don't want to hear an excuse when you're spending money on something else that you can't spend money on going to therapy, because I'm paying out of pocket and I have insurance, but he just didn't take mine. You know, he takes some of the other major ones, but that's huge for me. Like, it's really about really wanting it, in my opinion, you know, wanting to go versus sitting there and talking about it. And there's definitely other ways of, you know, there could be friends, there could be somebody that is just as good that you talk to in your family or your friends. I just wanted an unbiased opinion.
I think that's important when it comes to, you know,
and the education, you know, like somebody's training. Yeah,
they know what they're doing and they understand, like, generally how, like, people think and stuff like that. And that's what I just like when I think of therapy, right? It's obviously somebody helping you uncover some of that stuff, but it's also somebody calling you on your bullshit when it's bullshit, right? Like, because that's the problem I run into when I'm talking to people. It's like, you know, it's such a, like, a weird line to be on, because, like, when you know somebody's teetering on that mental health, what's the word I'm looking for? Fence, right? Mm-hmm. They're on it, and like anything that you say that might be negative might turn that, be like, oh, you're an asshole. Be like, but in the same token, you don't want to let them to get away with stuff, like, and set the precedence that that's okay for you to do, right? And that's the problem I had up until a couple of weeks ago, is that I didn't want to be the bad guy. Like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to say the things that might upset somebody. But then I got to a point where it was just like, what someone told me, right, that in a mental health crisis, the person that, if it's not you dealing with it, right, if it's somebody else, a family member, something like that, that it's not all on you as the kid or the family member to fix that person. Like, they have to do a lot of the work themselves, and you as the support system need to have your own kind of outlets and stuff like that, because if you're just taking the full brunt of the storm on, you're not going to be able to help that person. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with the last couple of weeks, and so it's just been interesting. That's why I was so excited to have this conversation today.
Well, and I think that it gets to us is where, and it happens on all sides. I've been in a really bad place that I was blinded. I was in denial. I was, in a bad place that I couldn't see certain things, and I didn't want to hear it. I didn't say I didn't want to hear it. I didn't really have any support at the time. I didn't have anybody really telling me, you should do better, or you can do better, or you don't deserve this, or get your shit together, or, like blah, blah, blah. I mean, I didn't necessarily have that, but I've been there where I didn't want to face till it got to a really bad point. We say about, hitting rock bottom, or, we get to a point where, the only way up is up, because there's nowhere else to go. But I think that we get to a point sometimes where we feel conflicted in being there and being a good friend or a good son or daughter, whether it's our parents or significant other or friend. And I think that we get to a point where we feel guilty as being a bad person or a bad friend or not being supportive, versus trying and getting nowhere. And I'm in a similar situation. Not going to get into it, but it's hard, because when you have good intentions and you have pure good intentions from your heart, that deep down you're doing the right thing. But when there are, from the flip side, when somebody doesn't have that clarity and isn't ready and doesn't want to face it, doesn't want to hear, they make you out to be the bad guy. And you know what? And that's okay. Because you have to know where you're at, and you have to know that you were doing the right thing and trying to help somebody, and those boundaries. And you can't feel bad. And there's sometimes where we have to walk away, and we've done it. I've said this. I've had to walk away from, things with my parents or my mom at times in the past over the last 10 or 15 years where we have differences. And sometimes you need to just take your space from people. But knowing what the space is for, because you need to grow on yourself, and you need, that maybe it's not a good, it's toxic for you, but that make the growth, recognize what needs to be there and make the growth and do those things. And sometimes we have to walk away. And it's unfortunate because it's our family and our friends and we love them, but how much are we going to bring ourselves down and affect our own mental health because somebody else's mental health isn't there? And that's where I think that's the struggle. And we've talked about that, I think, on other podcasts, is the struggle. And I think that all we want is for those people that we care about to be able to take that path with us, and have those conversations. Deep down, I think a lot of it has to do with communication too. And, there's a lot with denial, but as far as communication, if you can communicate those things to somebody, it's about being honest with yourself and honest with other people. And if you can communicate that and just sit down and have those hard conversations, again, another podcast that we've had. See, we've had all these podcasts about all these little topics that combine into one. And it's having those hard conversations to grow and to be, to move on from those things. But there's just some people out there that can't. And that's hard.
Well, look who's back. The man,
hey, Brandon.
the man, the myth, the legend, our fact checker, Brandon. I know he's working hard. He's got a couple big projects he's working on. But Brandon says, for those that can't see, mental health is such an important topic that we do not talk nearly enough about. And I mean, and then he little smile there from Brandon. But yeah, if you're just jumping on, we're talking about mental health today. We've talked about little snippets along the way up until this point. But this is a full-on episode dedicated to mental health. And something you said that was really something that I struggled with. And you talked about, feeling guilty about, maybe what you're not doing for them, because, if you do said thing, it sets that precedence, right? Like maybe it's someone coming to stay with you or something along those lines, right? Or maybe it's some, whatever the situation might be. Like, I don't want to get too deep into it, but when you you should say no, but then in the back of your head, you're like, well, if I say no, no one's going to say yes, right? Like, so it's that pressure of wanting the best for that person, right? Wanting the best for them. But at the same time, like you said, setting those boundaries, because those are super important to set those boundaries, to be able to say no, to respect your own mental health and the mental health of whoever you're in a relationship with or whoever surrounds you, right? Because your mental health is just as important as that person is that's going through that crisis. And you can't help them if you're not the best version of yourself. I know I've said that a couple of times now, but I firmly believe it.
Yeah. And I think that we can only help everybody else so much, and we forget to help ourselves. And I think that there's times where, my sister with her health issues, my mom and I battled on, on what we thought was needed or best, or, for my sister, obviously. And there were times where over the last 2 years, we struggled in our relationship because of that disconnect in certain things. And I do think it has to do with things that my mom needs to unpack. And she knows that, and we've talked about, and she is. But I think that, we can't help people that don't want to be helped. And if they're not ready, and we've talked about that before. And just because we're at a place and we're on the outside and we have had experience, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to those people, or it's not the same, obviously. But I think that it's coming from love. As long as these things come from love and the heart and good intentions of wanting better for somebody. But I think that you can only do so much. And then there's a point where you have to, and I don't use the word be selfish, but I think that you have to, okay, it's like the 3 strikes and you're out, or like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. It's those situations where how long are we going to affect ourselves and be miserable or have toxic in our life, and then our significant others or our other friends keeping that going, where sometimes it's hard because it's family and friends sometimes, Yeah. That's really what we're talking about. And I think that when you start to learn to have that, you're right. It is respecting yourself, and your circle, that you have to sort of realize that. And I think that's even with parents and with, situations and relationships. We have to focus on ourselves and our spouse or significant other, and then children, right?
Yeah.
And some people can't separate that sometimes. And it's not our role. It is not our role and our duty to fulfill somebody else's life and somebody else's relationship because they're in a miserable relationship, or, and you can't carry other people.
Yeah. No, like you said, that just kind of hits the nail on the head, and it just, yeah. So it's something that I know we all struggle with, is just having those real conversations with that person, just because we don't want to be the bad guy. No one wants to be the bad guy, but in this situation, like you were saying, like I have to take care of me, my family, like in no particular order, right? Mm-hmm. Kids, like you got to take care of those things first. And like when I think of like mental health, especially if you're a person that's not maybe actually dealing with the mental health issue, right? When I went into this center for this person to, get better, one of the things they kept talking about is that you need, as the person that's going to be the support system, you really need to focus on you too. Like this is mm-hmm. just as much as for you as it is for them. One, that person has to be willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. That person has to be willing to change and to do things different. If they're not, doesn't matter what you do, what you say it, how angry you get, how you stomp your feet, like what you take away from them, that person's not going to change. Like it's just, they don't want to change. Mm-hmm. And so you can't want it more for them than they want it for themselves.
Right. But usually I think that's the case.
Yeah.
In most of my experiences, I have, and that's how it usually has been for me. And that's the difficulty, because the energy that you're putting in for that, where's it going? So
what I do, right, is a great analogy, right? Just picture this. Whenever you go on to, and if you've never been on an airplane before, you won't get this, right? But most of us, I would think, have some point been on an airplane, right? And they get to the point where they're, they're telling you about your seatbelt and all the other stuff. And then they tell you about the oxygen mask that drops down, right? And what do they always say with the oxygen mask? Secure your own before you secure somebody else's, right? Because if you're trying to secure somebody else's and you're losing oxygen, you're not going to be able to help that person because you're going to be dead in a couple minutes.
Absolutely.
So you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help other people, because now you're in the safest situation you can be in. If the oxygen mask is coming down in a plane, you're in the safest situation, I guess. But but that's what I think about is like, all right, I ask myself questions, and this is something I think you should do in your life in general. You should ask yourself questions before you do something, because that means that you're thinking about the situation you're in rather than just reacting, right? You're responding to that situation. Mm-hmm. And ask yourself, like, am I putting my own mask on first, or am I helping this person without putting my mask on? Right? Like, not masked in the sense of like, the coronavirus and stuff like that. I'm talking about, are you putting on your oxygen mask first before you put it on somebody else's?
And it's so relatable to other instances and examples, because I just did that for a client and a business that had lost a designer, and I was trying to help them. And, we talked about a situation that seemed grandiose and this great concept and this great idea, but I still hadn't gotten my website up, or, the apparel, like I'm still working on certain things for myself and my business. And it's like, wait a second, I sat here for a couple weeks and I helped you, but I'm not getting help. There was supposed to be some type of deal there that I was getting something done and then I was going to help you. And it can relate in business a lot, I think, and work wise, because I have always been a giver, but I do think that I've gotten to the point where I need to put myself and my business first in order to get where I want to be, and then be able to do, help everybody else. And I had to catch myself. I mean, I was like, I can't do this for another week. I can't keep doing this. And I had to stand up. And unfortunately, a lot of times people they're not listening, or they're not hearing you. They're listening. They're not hearing you.
They're not trying to hear you.
Right. They just want things to be their way. And that's what happens in friendships and in relationships. And I think that this is a great topic, because people aren't listening to what other people are listening and hearing. Let's just say, I know that there's supposedly whatever difference, but it's taking, and those are the people that are sucking the energy out of us or other people who want to give. And I think that there's a fine line between giving what we can give and what we want to, but again, putting ourselves first and saying, I want to be there for you, I want to support you, but gotta do me first,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we've been talking about this, and we could probably talk about this for the next couple of hours. Maybe we'll do a mental health
checkup every
podcast number part 2. Maybe we'll bring on a therapist or something like that. Somebody that would give us real insight, right? Because like we always say, we're not experts on this area that we're talking about right now. We're just happen to be.
I'm just obsessed with it.
We just have a lot of. Let me say this: we have a lot of experience in this realm, right? I think a lot of people have experience in mental health, either dealing with it or on their own personal level, or dealing with it from a as a support system. But it is the time of the show where and what did Brandon have to say? That would be great. Burnout is a very difficult to deal with. That I mean, that's
about burnout too.
Yeah, that is a real life thing.
It is, and that's what I was talking about. The difference between obviously, diagnosed medical, mental health, like when we talk about anxiety and depression, and then obviously a burnout or situationally depressed. I mean, there's huge differences, but there's a lot of similarities in how to somewhat cope with them.
Yeah, totally. So, but like I said, today it is the time of the show, right, where we end with 2 little things. And so if this is your first time watching, welcome. Thank you for joining in and partaking in our show. But there is a moment, actually of 2. And so the first thing we like to end the show with is the millennial meme of the week.
I like how you got really, you got it like echoey when I'm like, the millennial meme.
So we haven't quite decided the jingle yet, but we'll figure it out. But it is Mel's turn. And just like in true Mel fashion, she can't make her mind up, and she has 2 memes again. So we just let Mel do what she wants.
I love variety. I always say I love variety, but maybe this is me just getting.
What do they say?
Getting anxious that I have to choose one. I have to commit just to one. I can't.
What do they say? Variety is the spice of life, right?
I am going to throw up this great one here. So this is perfect. It is this text pretty much explains my life, and it is a glass jar of stress relief lotion from Bath and Body Works aromatherapy. Actually, I have this, and it smells phenomenal. And it is smashed on the ground, and the lotion is everywhere. But it's stress relief. So the whole idea is it's gone, and it is all over the floor.
I love that.
So that was a good one. And then
that was a good one.
I also thought this was great. It's Jack Nichols. He's got his hair all wild, and he's all scruffy, and it says, "I'm going to try to act like a normal, happy, mentally balanced person today. Wish me luck." And he is just looking like a hot mess nightmare. So I thought those are 2 great ones.
I really like because I think everybody in America knows exactly, like as soon as you brought up the Bath and Body's work, like stress, like I would say 80% of the people that are watching this knew exactly what that smelled like, because it's such like, I think every household at least has had it in the house at one point. Right?
I use it a lot. The stress relief one. It smells so good.
But I always feel like it's in a bathroom that no one ever uses. So
I got it on my nightstand, so I put it on I rub it on at night when I get in bed.
That's a good idea. A lot of people have like the diffusers and stuff like that right by their bed, and so. But there is another moment, right? And Mel, in certain weeks, gets to double dip, right? Mm-hmm. Not only does she get the millennial meme, but she gets Mel's moment.
Mel's moment.
So it's an opportunity for Mel to share something with us to take us into the weekend. So Mel, go ahead, take it away.
And we usually also digress because we yell. We've been yelling all millennia yelling, and now this is a softer moment. And I thought about this that we didn't necessarily. Sometimes it has a punch to it sometimes, but I think that we didn't necessarily get to talk about this. But I also think that one book that I read a while back called Present Over Perfect. And I think that a lot of times we can notice ourselves when we're having issues, with mental health and things that we're going through, that we're not present. And I think that we can notice that about other people. And I think that is something to say about trying to get through these things that we're all going through and unpack and, and deal with a lot of these situations in our life so that we can be present. So I would say for the weekend, be as present as you can. It's the Zac Brown Band concert tomorrow in Hershey, and I'm hosting a backyard tailgate with all my friends. So we're going to be very present in this memory. I sent you the little invite. Of course, I make invites for everything, but I think that trying to recognize situations that we are in and that we need to maybe get out of or maybe need to change, so that because we're not going to be able to live in the present and enjoy the things that we are. And it is about being honest with ourselves and living, honestly, I think with everybody else that we're with, and knowing who we are is to be here and be present and figuring out how you need to get there. It's different for everybody. Maybe it's not counseling, but for me, it's great. It's worked wonders. So just focusing on the things that we need to unpack and get out so that we can be present.
Yeah, I love that. I'm looking at the book right now. It looks like a great read. I can't pronounce this woman's last name, but I think it's Shauna Ninquist. Is that Ninquist?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but
it looks like a pretty good read. So,
yeah.
But anyways, I was just thinking about this. I had this really weird analogy when you were talking about like how we're yelling and screaming, and then we get to Mel's moment, right? It's a little bit slow down. It's like a high school dance, right? You had this loud music, and then at the end, you always have a slow dance song. It's Boys to Men or something like that. Everybody's awkwardly dancing at the end, like, oh, we just, so, but
yes, it's true.
Do they have high school dances anymore? I don't even know.
Unfortunately, last year, a lot of them, they didn't.
Yeah.
They missed a lot of that.
Yeah. But anyways, guys, we appreciated everybody that jumped on, that commented today. Brandon was back, right? Back with a vengeance.
Yes, Brandon, we missed you.
He was back and ready to yell with us. But like I said, if you are struggling with mental health, there's plenty of resources on the internet for you. There's plenty of numbers to call. There's plenty of people to talk to that want to help you through that situation, and vice versa. Even if you're somebody that's supporting somebody in a mental health situation, there's plenty of resources on that as well. Google is a wonderful search engine. They will lead you to where you need to. They will at least get you a number that you can call and get some help. So do not hesitate to ask for help ever, is probably my advice taking into this weekend. But like I said, me and Mel are going to go into the weekend. We're going to do what millennials do, right? We're going to go have a good time.
Make experiences.
Yes, make experiences. And so that's a good way to end the show. So anyways, make sure you check us out every Friday, 2:00, not 12, 2:00.
Yeah.
And we'll let you know what next week's episode is going to be about so that you guys can tune in. But make sure you set your notifications for that. Go check us out on other websites. But enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you soon, and we'll see you next Friday.
Bye.